Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. My name is Dina, and somebody asked me this week about why people lie. Why do they cause the chaos that they cause? So I did some thinking about my past and what I know and what I've experienced and what I've seen. And quite honestly, there's so many different reasons that people lie, but it really boils down to a few things, and it's revenge. So if somebody did something to you and um, then you want to get them back, so it's revenge driven, which is also ego. um, Bitterness, thinking that you're the victim and you want to get back at them, revenge. That's a part of ego and control, right? So control is attacking unassuming people, thinking that you're going to gain something off of that attack. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen people, I call them pot stirrers, right? They control the room, they control the narrative, they control their surroundings. And anytime that they're in a situation where they can breathe out some sort of negativity or competition or something, some sort of bitterness or change, like an argumentative change, they thrive on it. Now, I don't know whether that's narcissistic. I don't know whether it's psychopathic. I have no idea. Call it what you will, but really, at the end of the day, it's a bored person with a very large ego. And I mean, just gonna break it down. I don't particularly like labels, but I think we all can fit into certain labels at different times of our life and different paths, that we're on. Um, so I don't think the labels really matter. And you hear a lot online about narcissistic personality. You hear a lot about sociopath and psychopath. Perhaps there are people that fit those narratives, but at the end of the day, really what it is it's a love of control and a love of um, competition or um, believing that you are above someone. Like perhaps you do have a higher intelligence level. Some of the people that I've seen that like to stir that pot in some rooms tend to be the loudest of the group. They tend to be very strong speaking, and a lot of folks don't like confrontation. And so throughout my entire career, I that was one of the things I walked away realizing is that the loudest of the group tends to be the one that people will flock to and listen to. They will follow them without any um, research on their own, without any um, review of the narrative that's being formed for them. And that's really scary. That's the group mind think. But it starts somewhere. It starts with the loudest, the most forceful, the most threatening sometimes. I've had board members threatened numerous times. And unfortunately, many of them will cower to that kind of thing. And they shouldn't. And I say shouldn't not in a judgmental fashion, but in a heartfelt, I see you kind of fashion. Like it shouldn't be that way. So when you start to see people acting very controlling, trying to manipulate others, you can understand very clearly that's due to their oversized ego, and that needs to be controlled. It really does. And what makes me understand this? Well, because I worked with literally hundreds of people, actually over several thousands of people actually. And I was always the front face for these groups. And if I had allowed, well, let me step back. So remember I had said at one of my shows recently that I had taken some tests when I was very young. I was like 18, 19 years old. I was, a new mom, 19 or 20, and I was a new mom. And I had to decide like where I was going to go with my life, how I was going to take care of her. And so one of the tests that I taken, one of the questions I remember them asking is, do you need recognition for the things that you do? And I thought about that question for a few minutes. I thought, no, not really. I've got a pretty good self-esteem. I don't really need people to pat me on the back every time I do something. And so that sort of led me in the direction of the career that I found myself in, um, as a property manager. And so, like I said, I'm in front of the room. I'm shouldering a lot of complaints. I'm dealing with a lot of people, thousands of people at times, and many thousands of people actually. That I'm looking back and thinking about it. And I had to be that front face for the board of directors who were constantly bombarded with negativity, um, excess uh, anger, and people trying to control them and what they decided to do. And a lot of the times, I had to be the person to shoulder a lot of that because I couldn't have the board members shouldering that. They wouldn't continue on the board. It's a volunteer position. So I had to shoulder it. I had to answer to these folks. I had to be able to articulate what was wrong about their thought patterns and where they're where they're going with their narrative of whatever the situation was at the time. And through that, I realize now all of the things that I've gone through over the last 8 to 10 years. Um, I realized just how many people knew me, but I didn't know all of them. I can't possibly know thousands of people, but I could stand in front of rooms of hundreds of people and speak to them. I can respond to requests and be the bearer of bad news, which is exactly what I called myself most of the time. I'm the bearer of the bad news. That was my job, and I did it well. I did it most of the time without causing friction or enemies, but I'm sure that there was a small handful of folks that just did not like hearing the word no. And that's okay. And that's part of not shouldering, like not needing somebody to back me up, not needing somebody to lift me up higher, not needing somebody to say, hey, you're doing a good job. Um, so I had to shoulder all of that. And I did very well at it. I was very good in my career. So when you have to tell people no a lot, you have to deal with their arrogance. You have to deal with their entitlement and their ignorance to whatever it is that you're trying to explain to them. And you have to be able to not be not be overly critical of their ignorance. You just have to teach them. You have to guide them and lead them in the direction that you want them to go, and things that they need to understand. That was never an easy task, but it was always a task every single time. And so where does this come in? Well, when people are lying, they're believing the mean people, they're believing the overarching control and power of, like I said, the loudest person in the room. And if you cannot see who that person is, like what I've gone through in the last 8 to 10 years, I didn't know where these negativity, the overarching control, the nastiness, the unbelievable jealousy. I didn't know where all of this was coming from or who was saying what. So I had no opportunity to address it directly and guide them into the truth. I had no way to lead them down that path to release their ignorance, to release their arrogance and their entitlement to whatever they thought they were due from my life, because they weren't due anything. Nobody is due anything off of my life except maybe my children. Other than that, nobody is. And some of the things that in my career, I think back, and like I said before, it was a great career. I loved it. But it had its moments where people were very, very boisterous, and they would lie and they would cause problems just for the sake of causing problems. In fact, I had a conversation with one of my members one time, and she come to my office and she wanted a certain thing. She didn't want to follow a particular rule, and I explained to her, if you don't want to follow the rules, here's how you can change the rules. But you have to follow them as they are written, just like laws of the state. You can't just pick and choose what you want to follow. You bought into this place. It is guided and monitored, and it is controlled under a set of guidelines, and you have to follow those guidelines. Well, she didn't like that. So when I asked her, I said, what makes you, go into these board meetings and cause so much chaos? Why do you talk to people and tell them things that are not true? And this happened, like this one particular woman I can think of, she was really good at it. But this happened in every place that I managed. It wasn't just one incident. There was various people that would act the same way. The loudest voice is the one that gets heard. And that's what she said. She said, I can control the narrative by just being loud, and I can just get people to follow what I want them to do. If I tell them that this is wrong, they'll believe me. They won't look into it themselves. So I don't have to do anything different than what I'm doing. I thought that is just unbelievably controlling. And so when people lie, it has to do with that. It has to do with their ego. It has to do with their control and the naivety, if that's the right way to say it, of people that just want to live their lives in a peaceful manner. Most people, like I said, don't like confrontation. They don't like problems. They don't like anger or dealing with angry people. They will cower down. I had a friend that she was a great friend of mine, and she was the same way. I was not. I don't mind confrontation. I don't mind telling people the way I see that they're wrong. But most people won't do that. Most people will just stay the course, ignore what's going on around them, and not engage in the chaos and the nastiness because they don't want to be involved. They want to stay in their box. They want to stay with their blinders on, so they don't have to put themselves out there. Predominantly, that's what I found that most people are like. But those ones that like the control, like I said, they are the ones that are the pot stirrers. They are the ones that are out there. They can share lies because most people aren't going to follow up and check if what they're saying is true. Most people won't take that time to do the research, to talk to other people, to find out, to do the reading that it would require to possibly find out if what this person is saying is actually true. And that's been a big problem of what I've gone through, because people are fed a narrative about someone in these groups, whatever these groups are that you have going on. You're fed a narrative, and you have no idea whether that narrative is based on truth or not. Now, it could sound like truth, but perhaps it's nowhere near the truth. And how foolish will you feel when you realize that the narratives you've been fed are just a bunch of lies? How would that be? I think I'm just going to end it with a Psalm 102, verse 17. He will respond to the prayers of the destitute. He will not despise their plea. And that goes with, personal and business. If you're facing people that are lying, if you're facing people that are overarching control freaks, do your research, talk to other people, find out what's going on, and don't believe the biggest loudmouth in the room. And until next time, my friends, keep healing.